The fast twitch muscles, which would never in a million years get involved in a 3-pound weight, they jump in to help the slow twitch. It's called crossover recruitment. Now you have switched over and you're starting to feel the burn. You're still in slow twitch and fast twitch, but now the fast twitch are engaged. And you're producing lactic acid with a much, much lighter weight. And you're still getting the same growth hormone signal if you produce enough lactic acid. And that's the fascinating part about BFR. I can lift 10, 15-pound dumbbells and get the same workout as I'm using 50s. And it's easier. It doesn't hurt any of my joints. And I'll tell you, Paul, since maybe the first 2 times I did BFR, I haven't been sore in 7 years. And I need no recovery. That's the fascinating part.
Welcome to Living 4D with Paul Chek. Today, Paul is talking with the owner of B3 Sciences, Dr. Mike DeBord, on blood flow restriction training. A big thank you to our premier sponsors, by Optimizers, Paleo Valley, and Organifi. We could not produce this podcast without their support. And of course, Paul only works with companies whose products he loves. All the sponsors offer special discounts for our listeners. So please visit the show notes page at chekinstitute.com/podcast for links and details, or just keep listening to this episode for the featured products and offers.
Welcome to Living 4D, everybody. Today we're going to shift gears a little bit. Our title today is Blood Flow Restriction Training with Mike DeBord. I began my exploration of Mike's blood flow restriction training, which is the B3 method, at the recommendation of my buddy Kyle Kingsbury, who has a great podcast. If you haven't listened to the Kyle Kingsbury show, he's also had Mike on there, so if you want to double up, you can do that. And Kyle told me all about the benefits he'd gained from it and had some really neat breakthroughs. So Mike sent me the B3 kit and I tested it out, and I think it's worth sharing with you guys. So we're going to get into some neat stuff today, and I think Mike's going to upgrade us on our technological advances with ways we can improve our training and train faster and get better results. So Mike, welcome.
Great to be here. Thanks, Paul.
To begin with, can you share an overview of your background and how you got into blood flow restriction training? And I also wondered, did you invent the method?
Great question. Sports chiropractor, practiced about 18 years. I had retired and got in the health and fitness industry. I have been running companies for the last 24 years. Approximately 2014, Dr. Jim Stray Gunderson, good buddy of mine. He's one of our top Olympic trainers, Bodie Miller, Lindsey Vonn, Mo and Galen runners, Alberto Zalazar. He was a pioneer in altitude training. Calls me from Japan, says, "Hey, Mike, you ever heard of BFR? I figured out what the Japanese athletes were doing." Now, in these two disciplines, one of them speed skating, the other one was swimming. They were kicking everybody's butt. So everybody thinks they're doping. Jim's trying to figure out what they're doing. Catches them out of the corner of his eye in kind of a little tent, kind of hidden. Get these bands on their arms and legs, and they're doing some exercise prior to competing. Well, he got to meet the developer, and I'm not the developer of it. The developer of this technology actually stumbled on it in the 60s, Dr. Sato. He's kneeling down at long praying sessions, Japanese praying, and he gets up and he walks and his calves start burning, like he just went and did a bunch of calf raises or running. He figured out what he thought was he had cut off blood flow. It took him about 30 years to perfect this, and then he developed a system that is very popular in Japan. They're 15 to 20 years ahead of us in Japan, even as popular as it is now. But what he figured out is, if we slow down blood flow into a working muscle, we also slow down available oxygen. It's kind of like altitude training. Why do we put an altitude mouse on, right? We want to reduce oxygen. What if we reduced it in the working muscle? Hence, blood flow restriction training. He came over and put them on me when I was 52, and I was all beat up, but all I knew was strength training. I'd already replaced 3 joints. And he gives me little 3-pound pink dumbbells, and I'm just laughing at him saying, "Come on, dude. 3-pound dumbbells," and my arms start getting all pumped up. And in a matter of a short period of time, I felt this pump in the burn like I'd just done a longer, harder workout. I start moving my shoulder around. I said, "Jim, why is my shoulder not hurt?" And he just laughs. He said, well, that's nitric oxide, the runner's high, the gym buzz. And then he says, we're not done. I put him on my legs. And I say, okay, how much are we going to squat? He says, no weight. I said, come on, dude. I can squat some weight. He said, you don't need any weight. So I just start doing slow air squats. I do 4 minutes, felt like I just did a 30-minute leg workout. I started implementing this. I've reduced my workouts down to 12 to 15 minutes over the last 8 years. But what was fascinating is it felt like I was 25 again. I was getting the pump and burn I couldn't get at 52. It wasn't taking me long, and it was dramatically less wear and tear on my body. So the cortisol effect was dramatically less. Fast forward real quick, in 30 days, I felt like I was 20 years younger. I got all my muscle back. I got my six-pack back that I'd been chasing for 15 years, and all my joint pain went away. So, that was 7.5 years ago. And now we've got over 40,000 people in my company, and it's becoming very popular across the United States. And, because of my story and my son, which we may get into, he earned a Division I scholarship in football by just using these for speed. Because of those stories, I launched B3 Sciences, and that's, the company Kyle's found. Some of our clients are the Kansas City Chiefs, Los Angeles Lakers, famous celebrities, Mark Wahlberg, Thor, God of Thunder, Chris Helmsworth does this. Mercola's a big proponent of BFR. So, it's going to be very interesting and fun to get into this and share to people this technology.
Yeah, very interesting. I love it when useful new technologies come out that are kind of paradigm breaking in some ways, because I've put some questions in there, as you've probably seen, to address some of these paradigms. A question that popped into my head: are you familiar with the Boytanko breathing method?
I think so, yes.
Mm-hmm. Well, in essence, it's based on the concept that Dr. Boytanko found that a lot of people's health problems, including immune problems, high blood pressure, and many others, were coming from breathing too fast, which we know isn't good. But one of the reasons I'm bringing this up is because one of the side effects of using the Boytanko method is a significant increase in nitric oxide production. And my senior instructor, who's the director of our education, Matt Walden, he's a naturopath and an osteopath, very smart guy, sent me 2 really interesting articles that came out of the whole COVID crisis, showing that you could use breathing methods to significantly increase nitric oxide production, which greatly enhances immunity against bacteria and viruses. So, as a side note, your system may actually be really enhancing people's immune systems as well.
Oh, yeah, and there's studies on that. 163% increase in anti-inflammatory macrophages, one study. Another study, T killer cells. Nitric oxide is a very interesting substance, and most people don't know there's 3s, right? There's 3 types of nitric oxide.
I think in reading the articles, I remembered that, but because it's not something I'm fixated on, I didn't try to remember, but go ahead.
Right? You got inducible, you got neuronal, and you've got endothelial, right? The one that most people should educate themselves on is endothelial. Endothelial lining of your arteries. It's sitting in your blood vessels. So why do you take nitric oxide supplements? You don't take nitric oxide beets to release it. You take it to produce more nitrates in your diet so that that lining of your arteries is ready. It's got a full tank. And so, but you still have to do something to promote and release, right? You can do the breathing, which is one pathway like Wim Hof. Another pathway, the most powerful nitric oxide pathways, without a doubt, dropping oxygen in your muscles, right? Creating hypoxia. The body releases nitric oxide in response to hypoxia. And that's a fascinating. Most people can't get it, by the way. Paul, most people, they do stage 1 aerobic exercise, elevated heart rate and breathing takes care of the hypoxia. They never get past that. But a lot of people notice, hey, why do I get in this runner's high? Well, you're using oxygen so fast that elevated heart rate and breathing can't keep up. So your body goes into stage 2. It's like sending in the fire alarm people, right? Nitric oxide thins the blood. Why would it do that? So the blood can get the oxygen there faster. But the fascinating thing is your blood vessels open up. So you get more blood flow here. You get it more to this tendinitis. You get it more to the kidneys. And, Kyle Kingsbury, he got more nitric oxide into these arthritic joints that had poor blood flow.
And just for the listeners, hypoxia means blood flow restriction or limitation. But it's also important to state that with hypoxia comes anoxia, so a lack of oxygen. And I have some comments in there down below with tendon training we'll get into in a little while. But just so that the listeners that aren't familiar with the medical terminology know what you're meaning when you say hypoxia. It just means reduced blood flow to whatever the target tissue is. A heart attack is hypoxia at its extreme. Now, the B3 method seems to be breaking some paradigms regarding preconceived notions such as the need for high-intensity training for growth hormone response. The combination of high lactate production and cardio response is classically thought to be antagonistic to muscle hypertrophy due to high levels of cortisol, which you kind of touched on. Could you explain the physiology of how the B3 method of blood flow restriction accomplishes these responses and how it works in general? I'm particularly interested in the growth hormone issue because it's been many years since I was involved in studying all that. My whole life and system of development is far removed from physical issues because I found as a therapist, it didn't matter how good I taught people to eat or train. It was getting them to do it that was the real work. So I put many, many years of study into psychology and behavioral therapy and behavioral psychology and everything to do with behavior change because I found that was my biggest limitation. So it's probably been 12, 15 years since I was really on top of the literature. So when I was talking to you and reading about, reading your literature on your website and hearing from Kyle, I was thinking I'm going to have to ask Mike this because I'd really love myself to hear how this goes, because when I was doing a lot of research, and I still know this to be true because I use it myself, but studies on athletes, weightlifters, like Olympic lifters, bodybuilders, showed that high intensity training triggers a growth hormone response. But you're telling me you're getting it with really what is very low intensity training comparatively. So there must be a biophysical or a physiological adaptation that's triggering this. So I'm really curious to hear your explanation of that.
You bet. Let's just go down memory lane with everybody. Aerobic exercise, slow twitch muscles, oxygen is the primary fuel. That creates, if you create fatigue in the slow twitch muscles, you're going to create an adaptive response that affects your cardiovascular system. You're not going to build a giant gun working your slow twitch, but you're going to build endurance, VO2 max. Now you have an anaerobic side. That basically means without oxygen. Fast twitch muscles. So you have two muscle types, slow fast twitch, aerobic, anaerobic. The anaerobic pathway, the primary fuel is glycogen. Right? You're using glycogen. It's a stronger fuel. It's basically sugar that's sitting in the muscle to fuel the fast twitch muscles. So how do we create adaptation? We create strong endurance exercise, or basically what are you doing? If you want to trigger an aerobic change, you got to create drop in oxygen. You got to get the slow twitch muscles, right? I can sit here and do this all day. Forrest Gump went for a run. He just kept running, right? What if Forrest would have taken a right turn at the track and ran the stadium stairs? He'd have been done in 2 minutes. So aerobic exercise is about trying to use more oxygen, create more of a demand on oxygen than is flowing in. And everybody knows the difference between a flat treadmill and a treadmill at 15 degrees. You're putting more demand of oxygen on the muscle, right? So the way you create an aerobic benefit, right, is you create an oxygen demand. Everybody knows, right? You do Peloton, 45 minutes. It's those intervals where you sprint when everything happens, right? Mm-hmm. You're creating the oxygen demand. Now let's jump over to the anaerobic side. We know that if we want to work the anaerobic muscles, we got to typically do mechanical overload training, high intensity weight training, or explosion sprint. Now, how do you know when you're in the anaerobic pathway? This really turns the light bulb on for people. If you feel the burn, that's glycogen being used because glycogen, when it is metabolized for fuel, gives off hydrogen ions and lactic acid. So if you feel the lactic acid, everyone, you're in the fast twitch muscles, right? So I can sit here and curl 3-pounders all day. I'll never feel a lactic acid. I'm still in the slow twitch. But if I grab the 50s, right, I'm like, oh, wow, there's the burn. I'm no longer primarily in slow twitch. I'm in fast twitch muscles. So let's talk. What do we have to do to strength train and growth hormone? We know we've got to lift a significantly strong enough, heavy enough weight, maybe 60, 70% of 1 rep max, but we got to do some load.
Usually
Mechanical.
75% or higher.
If we want to create the burn, we've got to use the big weights. Now, here's the breakthrough. I used to think, and everybody thinks, that it is the overload of the muscle and the tearing that triggers the growth hormone. That's not what's doing it. The pituitarian brain has nerve pathways, afferent and efferent. All you need to know is your brain is paying attention, and your brain is looking for lactic acid. So if you produce lactic acid, it's going to trigger a release of growth hormone if the lactic acid comes out in enough volume. 2 examples. You feel the burn and you go, woohoo, there's the burn, and you back off, you're not going to get any growth hormone. You feel the burn and you keep going, and somebody helps you spot, and you stack sets on top, and you just keep driving the burn, and you feel that burn for a long period of time. That's the signal that's going to give you post-exercise growth hormone. So our traditional mechanical way of building strength and muscle is to use a strong enough weight to create fatigue in the fast twitch, right, and create the burn. Now, another fascinating thing I learned, micro tearing, that some people use the word out there, or post-exercise inflammation, is a unnecessary byproduct of overloading the muscle. Your brain doesn't go, oh, Paul, that's micro tearing. I'm going to give you growth hormone. Your brain is going to deal with that and repair it, but your brain is giving you growth hormone because of the lactic acid. So now, here's the fascinating part about BFR. We know if we lift a light weight, we're going to stay in slow twitch. We're never going to go get the fast twitch. But what if we reduce the oxygen in the slow twitch? We've got BFR bands on. We cut the oxygen in half. Now you're doing a light weight, maybe a third of what you would typically use. I'm lifting 3-pound dumbbells. I can do this right here. The slow twitch muscles can't keep up. There's not enough oxygen. Here's the fascinating thing. The fast twitch muscles, which would never in a million years get involved in a 3-pound weight, they jump in to help the slow twitch. It's called crossover recruitment. Now you have switched over and you're starting to feel the burn. You're still in slow twitch and fast twitch, but now the fast twitch are engaged. And you're producing lactic acid with a much, much lighter weight. And you're still getting the same growth hormone signal if you produce enough lactic acid. And that's the fascinating part about BFR. I can lift 10, 15-pound dumbbells and get the same workout as I'm using 50s. And it's easier. It doesn't hurt any of my joints. And I'll tell you, Paul, since maybe the first 2 times I did BFR, I haven't been sore in 7 years, and I need no recovery. That's the fascinating part.
That's pretty amazing.
I'm triggering that growth hormone. So on the growth hormone side, everyone, here's what we learned. Yes, you have to go get the fast twitch muscles. Yes, you have to produce lactic acid. There's a mechanical way to do it with heavy weights, and there's a metabolic way, reducing oxygen and creating crossover recruitment. Now, I'm not going to lead everybody to believe that one will create more growth than the other. What I'm seeing is they both create growth of growth hormone, right? So you can do it both ways. And for the serious people, I recommend to all my serious people, you should be doing both. But people like me, I'm all beat up. I haven't done heavy weights in 7, 8 years, and I don't need to anymore. So on that anaerobic side, we can go get the fast twitch muscle fibers with a third of the weight and without all the downside of the heavy weights. Now, we'll come back over to the aerobic side in a second because that's fascinating also.
Hi, I wanted to jump in here and let you know that this year marks the 20th anniversary of the now iconic book that started it all, How to Eat, Move and Be Healthy by Paul Chek. This special milestone marks 2 decades of the book guiding individuals on their journey to holistic health. And in that time, we have brought out 2 editions as well as versions in Swedish and Dutch. If you already have a copy, you will know that it is full of Paul's timeless and tested advice, and it has helped thousands of readers as Paul gets letters and emails from people all over the world. But did you know that the idea for the book came to him because he would have to repeat the same instructions over and over each time he took on a new client? So he decided to put his key coaching points into a book so he could help more than one person at a time. Fun fact, the book was initially going to be called Flatten Your Abs Forever, and the first draft was so long that the standing joke in our office was that all you had to do was lie on the floor with the book on your stomach and you would have instant flat abs. In honor of the 20th anniversary, I am thrilled to announce that we are releasing 2 exclusive versions of this book. The standard commemorative edition is perfect for first-time readers looking to discover the book for the first time, or those loyal followers who want to revisit it again. And for those who seek something truly unique, we present the Special Collector's Edition, an exclusive limited number with each book personally signed by Paul himself. Hurry, as both commemorative editions will be a limited print run. So to get your copy of the 20th anniversary edition of How to Eat, Move and Be Healthy, go to chek.group/eatmove20. That's chek.group/eatmove20.
Your method, because of the shorter time to lactate production, which, you're calling the burn, which is the classic name of that, and your shorter workouts, you're not going to get near as much cortisol production. In my training on how to design exercise programs, I show, for example, I ask my students the question, if you go to the gym and do 30 minutes of cardio and you lift weights for 30 minutes, who's actually working out the longest? And most of my students can't answer it. I said, well, actually here, if you take the average person of 10 to 12 reps and you count time under tension, and you look at the rest periods, they're only getting 6.5 to 8 minutes of exercise, but the guy on the treadmill is working out for 30 minutes straight. So he's got 4 times the cortisol production, which is antagonistic to growth hormone release, which is why I've always been telling bodybuilders, you got to stop doing so much damn cardio because you're actually working against yourself. But a question I had, I read a book and I have it in my library. I just can't remember the title, but it was by Fred Hatfield. It's a pretty thick book, a big one, but in there it has 2 or 3 different theories of hypertrophy, and one of them is called the lactic acid theory. I don't know if you're ever familiar with that, but there actually is a whole theory that it's the production of lactic acid that triggers hypertrophy. And you made me remember that as you were talking. I don't think anyone's even to this day figured out with any objective proof what the actual mechanism that triggers hypertrophy in the body. They just know that tension has to be there. Lactic acid is part of it. And there's a couple of other ones that it's been too long since I remember, but it's quite amazing that you are able, now that you're explaining it to me the way you are, I can see the light. Like, I'm like, okay, now that's the piece I was missing that I didn't just put 2 and 2 together in my mind. So it's great to hear that. I think one of the things that you're sharing here, particularly for guys like I'm 62, you're what, 58
60.
or something? 60.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
Most guys, by the time they're our age, they look like they've died and gone to somewhere other than heaven. But like you, I'm still lean and strong and in good shape. And because I know how to train and how to eat, obviously. But I can see that a lot of the guys that I've trained over the years, I had to take them slowly in their progressive development of their strength, mostly because of joint problems like arthritic joints and worn out cartilage and knees and shoulders and hips. I can really see that, when I was working with a lot of these types of patients, if I would have had your technology, I would have been able to take these guys to a lot higher level of success a lot quicker, because you can get the physiological and hypertrophy response without all the loading.
Yes.
So that's really very, very excellent. And I hope a lot of people listening out there realize there's a pathway for them so they can get off the couch and quit crying about how old they are.
Well, Paul, you used another word, tension.
Yeah.
So we know that mechanical time under tension, load stacking, we know that recruits fast twitch muscle fibers. Here's what I've learned. The soreness or the micro tearing is just a byproduct. It's unnecessary, but it has to happen if you're going to mechanically overload the fast twitch muscles, right? If you're going to get them to produce enough lactic acid. And there's a local stem cell reaction, there's the mTOR pathway. We don't need to get all that. Everybody knows I lift heavy weights, I feel the burn, I'm sore. The parallel pathway that Dr. Sato figured out is that we can go get those same muscle fiber types and go produce the same lactic acid and not have the soreness and the wear and tear on the joint and go get the lactic acid. Now, here's the big one, right? Paul, you know this. 25-year-olds, they don't have any cortisol worries. You get 35 or 40, you better understand cortisol, right?
Yeah.
Because you can't have high cortisol and you can't be anabolic and cortisol and stress. They don't play together. Cortisol just come right here and do that right there.
They're antagonistic to each other.
Right. You're not going to be in growth hormone if you're producing cortisol. And new studies, Paul, I don't know if you saw this. There's 3 fascinating medical reviews that just came out. Missouri Medicine, British Journal of Preventive Medicine, American Journal of Therapeutic Medicine. And they all did this long survey, and they concluded that once we get into our middle ages, that at 60 minutes a week of strength training, you've capped out your life expectancy and disease prevention. After 60 minutes, it starts going like this of strength training, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you and I know why. Cortisol, stress, cortisol is a killer. It was interesting. They all concluded that more than 120 minutes per week, you have the life expectancy of a person who's not even training. And here's me at 52. I'm doing 3 to 4 hours per week. I've already replaced 3 joints. I don't know any better. I'm taking ibuprofen, and I'm using every technique I can, knees over toes, everything I can to still try and get the pump and the burn. And I mean, at 52, I was about shot. Now, it wasn't because of the heavy weights. I had a lot of injuries. Most of us have injuries outside the weightlifting. I don't want to give weightlifting a bad name, but you bring in these injuries that you've had, car accidents, and now you can't load. And that was me. So to be able to all of a sudden get that same pump and burn and growth hormone release was just, I mean, you talk about, this is what Kyle experienced. He's like, my muscles back, my fat's down, my joints don't hurt. It's like somebody took me back in time 20 years. Yeah, Kyle, you are no longer producing cortisol from all those UFC injuries that you're trying to load, and you're still getting the growth hormone. So you took this cortisol growth hormone and you flipped it.
Yeah, last time I saw him, I immediately looked at him and said, dude, what have you been doing? Because your body looks different. You look leaner and stronger and, more vital. And that's when he turned me on to your approach. One of the things I'll throw in as a side note for the athletes, you've already alluded to it, but I want to make this point because it's important, particularly for strength athletes, power lifters, Olympic lifters, hammer throwers, sometimes wrestlers, people that have to have high intensity loading because of the environment they're in, because there's adaptation to the bony structure, to the cartilaginous and ligamentous structures and the connective tissues. I think it would be important for people to, in those environments, to mix your blood flow restriction with some high intensity training, because even though loading might not be ideal for guys in our age group so much, you have to have enough structural adaptation to handle those loads. And if you're using blood flow restriction, you won't get the loading that triggers the bony and connective tissue adaptation. So I think a mix of the two actually will turn out to be the blessing.
And we're doing that. I teach. I got 3 categories of people. I got your non-exercisers. I got people in wheelchairs, walkers. We put the bands on for 1 minute. We have them do something like sit down, stand up, or just squeeze like this. We just start the burn and we turn on. Then we got the kind of non-exercise, people. They go all BFR. It's no brainer, right? Or the people that are so beat up they can't load. And then I got the serious group. I got elite runners. I've got Ironmen. I've got NFL linemen. We do alternating BFR to start them. You're going to do a BFR short day. You're going to do a normal training day. And so if you got 6 workouts, half of them are going to be 15, 20 minutes BFR. Now, here's what they all first do, Paul, especially the runners, right?
It's not enough. It's not enough.
They start going into convulsions. Oh, my God, the world's going to end if I don't get my miles in, right?
I know. I've been down that road 1,000 times.
So, story for everyone. We got a Drake runner, 600-meter sprinter. So we just said, you know what? Just take 10 minutes, 3 days a week. Don't change all your training. 10 days a week in your dorm room. And she did BFR. We had her do a 5-minute just leg circuit, no weights. She calls and says, I've never felt a burn like that. More lactic acid, more growth hormone, right? In 2 weeks, she did 5 or 6. She took 2 seconds off her personal best.
Wow, yeah.
Well, okay, so
she's probably recovering a hell of a lot better.
Okay, so what happens, what I tell all the serious athletes, and here's what I will tell you, right? I'm not asking you to change for the rest of your life. I'm saying give this 2 to 4 weeks and do alternating training. Do some BFR, your normal BFR. Here's what will happen. You'll be doing your normal training, and in about 3 to 4 sessions, maybe quicker, you'll go, why on my normal day am I stronger? Why am I recovering faster? You're elevating growth hormone. And then the switch goes off. You go, aha, I don't have to. Then you decide, not me, you decide, hey, do I want to do 1 BFR every 3? Do I want to do 2 every 3? You decide where BFR. Some people go all BFR. Some people, they mix it in. Some people do finishers. We'll give you all those protocols. But I can tell you this, everyone, every athlete, and I've got Olympians that implements this and implements some BFR, changes some training over to BFR, they all go, oh my gosh, where was all this? Yeah, you're leaving fatigue on the table. You're leaving lactic acid in the muscle. And then I'll hit it with one thing. I'm talking to the USA Olympic weightlifting team, and I hope Mike Gattoni doesn't get mad because he didn't want anybody of the other teams around the world to know he's using BFR, right? And Chris Duffin, Kabuki Strength. Anybody ever heard of Chris?
I've interviewed him.
He's a BFR guy now.
Good. Right? He needs it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm talking to Mike and his coaches and the doctor. I won't mention the doctor's name. And yeah, Mike, we know about, we know about BFR. Look, I'm not teaching these guys anything, but here's what I am teaching them. I'm saying, okay, doctor, and I won't use his name. Say, doc, he's one of the top docs in the world strength. I said, when you do heavy weightlifting, how deep are you going into the glycogen reservoir? And he didn't have an answer for me. I said, are you 90% or are you 100% or are you 80? Well, if you're lifting heavy weights, you stop, not because there's no glycogen, because the load
you can't lift it anymore.
You can't lift it anymore. So I said, Mark, what if you're squatting 405, right? And you get to the end and magically it was 135. Now, Mark, if it was 135, we'd have never got there. Right? We'd be too much in slow twitch. But just humor me. What if all of a sudden you're pushing out more reps at the end? You're using more glycogen. He goes, we never thought of that. I said, doctor, in his name, I said, if you implement BFR, you're going to get to the end point that you're going to get to with heavy weights, the same, but you're going to be able to push out a few more reps. You're going to produce more volume of lactic acid. And if you want to measure some growth hormone, you're going to see it. But here's what you're really going to notice, doc. Every one of your athletes in about 2 to 4 weeks is going to start breaking records. So Mike calls me back and he says, hey, we put this on some of the junior guys and they're all breaking records. You're on to something. And then that was it. He said, don't ever call us, right? Because they don't want any secrets. Because at that level, right, a little secret. So for the heavy weightlifters, this is a tool to go deeper into the glycogen reservoir on your light days. Go get more glycogen and get a stronger growth hormone release. Then when you go do here's another story. This the lady that runs Chris Duffin's strength there and BFR, she going into COVID calls me and says, Mike, we're shut down. What am I going to do? Great chance for BFR. I said, just go do some 4-minute legs and some light BFR. She's like, I'm going to lose all my strength. I said, no, you're not. Just, it's okay. So she calls me about 6 weeks later and says, the gym's open up. What should I do? I said, go in there and load it up. I mean, build up, go see what you got. She calls me back and says, how am I stronger? I have not lifted a heavy weight in 6 weeks. You have tapped the other pathway, the metabolic pathway. Now, if you weren't doing the mechanical pathway, you'd still leave some food on the table, right? But when you start using both, you're talking about tapping into potential that you probably haven't seen before. And the strength world's starting to figure this out. This BFR thing is starting to move strength and records for people.
Well, another thing that you haven't mentioned that I'll throw on the table is for strength endurance athletes like wrestlers, where they have to spend a lot of time dealing with lactate, or, like when I was a competitive triathlete, I used to do time trials, 25-mile time trials. And that's one of the most painful things I've ever done in my life. But the point is that it takes a lot of training in a lactate-rich environment in order for your body to improve its capacity to metabolize lactate. So with this type of training, you can get low stress, high lactate environments where they're actually going to be much better at converting lactate into energy or back into adenosine triphosphate. So you're actually enhancing the body's ability to deal with what is usually the limiting thing in your performance. Because when you're tired, you're freaking tired. When your muscles are full of lactic acid, you're stuck. You get to where you just feel like your body won't move anymore, or you're going to vomit. How I could extend that out to other people, you get people, for example, people that work moving furniture, or who work as carpenters or loggers who are carrying heavy weights back and forth all day long, also have to deal with high levels of lactate. I mean, when we moved into this house, my God, we were carrying boxes all day long, and literally I'd get so much lactate. I had 240 boxes of books from my library, and each of these boxes is like 50 something pounds, and I would get exhausted and have to stop. But point being, if I was using this blood flow restriction training, I might have been able to go longer and not felt any different, but just got more work done. Does that make sense?
Well, first of all, let me tell you how fun it is, everyone, to talk to somebody who understands this. Paul, I mean, I've been doing this 7 years. I've been on 100 podcasts. I mean, there might be one or two guys that understand this, really understand the lactate thing. Here's what everyone should know, okay? Lactic acid has to be cleared. Now, what's one of the major methods that's done? Mitochondria. But everybody's going, no, wait a second. Mitochondria produces energy. Yes, but the mitochondria also have an inner lactate shuttle inside the cell that clears the lactic acid. I'll show you how it works. You feel the burn, you stop, lactic acid goes away. That's the mitochondria clearing it. Now, if you do BFR, you're going to create lactic acid faster. So that's trigger number one. More lactic acid. Here's what your mitochondria and brain are going to do. They're going to go, where's all this coming from? Never seen this before.
Yeah.
And then you're going to keep it going. And the brain and the nerves and the mitochondria are going to go, okay, now where's all this coming from? You're producing all this lactic acid. So the mitochondria have to go through mitochondrial adaptation. They rapidly multiply.
They do, yeah. For sedentary people, you can get 300% to 600% increase in mitochondrial population in something as little as 2 or 3 weeks with regular exercise.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. I'm sure grateful to have you on this journey with me and listening to the podcast and picking up new and interesting ways that we can all work together to make the world a better place for all living beings, now and in the future. Today, I'm really excited to tell you about Paleo Valley's new wild-caught fish roe. Have you ever tried wild-caught fish roe? I grew up on Vancouver Island, British Columbia, and each year during the salmon run, fish roe was plentiful, and when I'd eat it, I could just feel my body saying yes and wanting more. And that is exactly what happens every time I use Paleo Valley's carefully freeze-dried wild-caught fish roe capsules. Fish roe is an excellent addition to your daily health plan and is prized around the world by various cultures, containing an array of beneficial nutrients you'd get with whole food fish. Paleo Valley's wild-caught fish roe comes from fish caught by sustainably minded fishermen committed to preserving fish runs for future generations, and it's super clean and healthy. It gives your body a great dose of easily absorbed omega-3 fatty acids, which are super important and helpful. In fact, a recent study found 68% of American adults are not consuming enough omega-3s, and 89% had levels in the dangerously low range associated with high cardiovascular risk. Omega-3 deficiencies can cause imbalances in the omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acid ratio, causing things like unhealthy levels of inflammation, low energy levels, poor memory, joint discomfort, dry skin, heart problems, mood swings, and even depression. Fish roe is rich in essential long-chain omega-3 fatty acids from eicosapentaenoic acid, EPA, and docosahexaenoic acid, DHA, which have been linked to less inflammation in consumers, improved cognitive function, healthy mood and mental health, better vision, healthy blood pressure, supported cardiovascular health, and strong immune function, and more. Plus, Paleo Valley wild-caught fish roe is enhanced with other additional compounds and nutrients such as protein, DPA, choline, selenium, vitamins E, C, D, B2, and phospholipids for added benefits. If you're interested in research to back anything I've shared here, feel free to reach out to Paleo Valley and they can help you.
To get Paleo Valley's wild-caught fish roe with all the benefits of omega-3 fatty acids and none of the fishy taste, and to get 15% off, just go to paleovalley.com/Chek15. You don't need a promo code, as your discount will be applied automatically in your shopping cart at checkout. That's paleovalley.com/CHEK15 for a 15% discount on wild-caught fish roe.
So let me give you a couple stories. I've got these Ironman athletes. They train with the BFR and they want to go do this long. I said, just give me 10 minutes. Get in the burn in 30 seconds and step on the gas, and don't lose it. Like, I got to work out Ocho Loco. We do 8 minutes of legs. Burn comes in 30 seconds, but 7.5 minutes later, you're still in the burn. No, most people never felt that. Why? Because the amount of work you'd have to do would be huge. So all of a sudden, these athletes, their mitochondria rapidly adapt. And they go do these long Ironmans, and they call me and they're like, why am I not sore? I just did 8 hours. I said, yeah, because you got all this extra mitochondria. And then people start realizing it's not, time and load aren't as important as we thought. If your mitochondria that can clear the lactic acid, when you go do these long Ironmans, it's like you get up the next day, you're like, did I just do an Ironman? Yeah. But
that's great.
You've trained in a different metabolic crisis with BFR. Then when you go do the Ironman, here's what your brain's doing. Oh, we've seen this before. Yeah,
and we know what to do about it.
We know what to do. We just start clearing. And then all of a sudden, here's what the body does. And Paul hit on this. One of the first guys I've ever heard talk about this. It uses the lactate for energy. Not only does it clear it, but it converts it to a third type of energy for you long endurance athletes that you get into the burn and you're like, and then all of a sudden it kicks in. That's your mitochondria.
It's the intermediary between pure anaerobic and aerobic. It's the middle stage of transition in the energy system. I want to bring something up that I think is very important, especially for athletes that train for technical sports like martial arts or track and field and gymnastics, skateboarding, and things like that, because I've worked with every one of these. You have to be careful bringing that lactate up high when doing technical stuff, because lactic acid disrupts the proprioceptive system. And so, for example, if you look at research on injuries in athletics, about 90% of all sports injuries happen in the last period or quarter of a game. And the researchers found it's because they're getting lactic acid saturation. And I've actually done these tests myself. I've done proprioceptive tests. And what you'll find is that as lactic acid rises up, it disrupts the brain's ability to sense where you're at in space. So one of the things I've always had to be very careful with is to not saturate people with too much lactic acid when they're doing technical stuff like box hops or zigzag jumps or swinging complex kettlebell moves where you have to really have a sense of where you're at in space. So my caveat would be conscious that if you're using blood flow restriction and you're flooding yourself with lactic acid to make sure you're really skilled at what you're doing before you go into technical training, because you might find yourself dealing with an unwanted injury. Like a real common one is ankle sprains. When people get too much lactic acid, they can't tell where their foot and ankle are at in space.
You know what I've never had, Paul? And I've got to afford, nobody's ever called me and said I pulled a muscle. Yeah, you're losing a light weight.
Right, yes.
Right. And look, here's what we don't do with BFR. We don't go throw as hard as we can. You don't do that with BFR. You throw at 70%. You don't sprint. You interval training at 70%. You don't maximal lift weights. You don't do that. That would be silly. Do not put additional mechanical tension into a muscle with BFR and then go rip it. No. The key to BFR, if you want to remember the simplest thing, is I'm going to do BFR and start in slow twitch muscles. That's a slow, easy movement. And I want to fatigue the slow twitch. So I get on the treadmill or I throw easy, 60, 70%. It's like when my son went from a 4.62 to a 4.35 40. And by the way, he ran at Ohio State. I got the card. He did his normal speed training, right? And shuttles and Vertimax and all that stuff, but he's going about 70, 80%. But he's creating a deeper burn than he's ever felt, right?
Yeah.
So that's one of the great things about BFR is you can, in your sport, kicking, and we got a lot of technical sport people, you can go get to the fatigue you need to adapt without having to use the heavy loads to get there, right? But you're not going to compete, and you're not going to try and break records in BFR bands, right? You're not going to do that in BFR.
I think now that I'm talking to you in person, one of the things I need to do is next time I use the bands, I got to go lighter, because I normally do biceps curls with 55. If I want to do a drop set, I'll go 60s till I'm cooked, then 50s till I'm cooked. So I started off with the bands with 25 pounds thinking, because for me, I could probably do 80 reps with that without the bands on. But now listening to you, I think that I probably would be better off to even go lighter.
10, 15. Right? And just slow it down. Remember, everyone, we want to fatigue slow twitch muscle. So we're using oxygen. So we're not going to do this stuff. We're going to keep the muscle contract. I can do this right here and get the burn going. I'm using more oxygen just doing this. Here's the magic. Oxygen flows at a 10. You got to go to an 11. If we cut the oxygen to a 5, you only got to go to a 6. 6 is easy. Once we get there and we're using more oxygen than's flowing in a relatively light movement, can be a squat, can be a run, it's just not maximal. When you are using more oxygen than's flowing, you will know it. I won't have to teach you. You'll go, oh, there's the burn in the pump. You're in anaerobic. You're producing lactic acid. It's like you're on the treadmill. And then you asked the question earlier. Let me give you a couple stories. I got a 24-hour, 3-time national champion. He's the reigning 3-time national champion, Brent Rumgardner, in 24-hour mountain biking.
Wow.
So he trains 6 hours a night, 5 nights a week, calls me up, says, Mike, put my daughter to bed at 5, it's at 9. Right, I train till 2:30, I get up 7. I can't do this anymore. Somebody told me you could possibly. I said, Brent, you're not going to like what I say, because you're probably going to buck me like a bronco. But Brent, I need you to go about 15, 20 minutes and then step away from the bike. I need you to be okay with that. I'll try anything. Okay, so Brent, all I want you to do is do every other workout. 15 minutes on the bike. You want to go 20, great. That's it. You're done. You're going to feel the burn, Brent, at 30 seconds. Don't back off. Don't go touch the burn. Here's what people do. Ooh, there's the burn. Ooh, there's the burn. No, you want lactic acid production. Continual. So he gets on the bike. He's like, ooh, there's the burn. And he made it about 12 minutes and called me and said, that was the craziest 12 minutes I've ever done. Yeah. He calls me. He said he does it 6 weeks, and he calls me and he measures, right? This guy's at the top of the top. He said, I was hoping I did not lose any of my cardio endurance VO2 markers. I stayed the same. How did I put 2 inches on my quads doing an aerobic move?
And growth hormone.
Brent, you know that burn you're feeling? Did it kind of feel like you were squatting? He said, yeah. I said, you went from slow switch to fast twitch in a movement that typically is only a slow twitch activity. You're in the burn. It's like You're on the bike, Brent, or treadmill. It's like you jumped off and went and did squats, but you didn't leave the treadmill. You're in fast twitch. He said, I can't believe this. I put size on my quads doing a cardio exercise. I said, well, Brent, you were initially doing a cardio exercise.
Yeah, technically not. Yeah.
Right. You switched over and you went anaerobic fast twitch as if you were all of a sudden doing strength training. And here's the fascinating thing that 5 to 10 years from now is going to revolutionize exercise. We can do an aerobic exercise and get strength training and cardiac improvement. Or we can go do strength training. Okay, let me give you another story. Ingrid Butts, 3-time Olympian, cross-country athlete, calls me up. She's in her late 40s. Mike, I'm still at the time. I'm competing, but I can't lift it. The heavy weights are killing me. Somebody told me I could. I said, Ingrid, if you're willing to buy it, yep. So she switches over and does all BFR, and she's putting muscle on now instead of losing it. Calls me 6 weeks later and says, okay, I have not put the bands on in any cardio movement. I'm only doing strength training like you told me. How am I faster? I just broke all my aerobic records. I said, Ingrid, when you started in that strength training, you were in aerobic and you created hypoxia. You used more oxygen than was flowing. And it doesn't matter if it was 30 seconds or 30 minutes. You created a deep drop in oxygen that triggered lactic acid, nitric oxide, and mitochondrial adaptation as if you were running. And she's just like, this is crazy. And that's what all these athletes are telling me. I did strength training and my VO2 max went up. I did cardio and my legs got bigger.
Well, also, even if you're just isolating the bands to your arms, the lactic acid's getting into general circulation. So you're actually enhancing lactate metabolism through the entire body.
Yeah, studies have shown.
So it's going to be there's going to be a global benefit, even though you're only training your arms is what I'm saying, or your legs or whatever. But my next question was about shortening workouts, but you've done a good job of explaining that it doesn't take nearly as much time in the gym to really get a good physiological response, a hypertrophy response, which I think is very good for a lot of people, for busy people like me, and probably you.
What did you say earlier, Paul? Everybody listen to, I'm going to repeat what he said. When you go 30 minutes of strength training, you go 30 minutes of cardio, where are you working out more?
Yeah.
Your 30 minutes of strength training was only 6 minutes in the burn.
Right.
So everyone look at this. I don't care if you work out for 2 hours of strength training or 20 minutes. Tell me how long you're in the burn. Because if you're in the gym for 2 hours, you got your phone out, you're on Instagram, and you're taking rests. Those 2 hours, you were in the burn about 7 to 8 minutes. What if we took that burn and we, in 15 minutes, went and got the same 7, 8 minutes? That's where the adaptation happens. So BFR is just about, we're going to go get the same amount of burn, but we're going to do it more efficiently. And then at 2 hours, you're producing cortisol. At 15 minutes, there's no cortisol.
Yeah. Another benefit too, which you may or may not have looked into, but because I know the physiology of everything we're talking about, research done on looking at basal metabolic rate showed that in people that are given aerobic exercise, their metabolic rate drops down fairly quickly as their heart rate slows down and their body cools. But in bodybuilders and weightlifters, they had an increased metabolism for 3 days, for 72 hours. So why this is important is because when you want to get elevated metabolism to keep your body lean, you don't need to train near as much, because you're going to get the weightlifting effect in short periods of time, which is going to actually give you metabolic benefits for 3 days. Now, as a person adapts, of course, they're going to get more efficient at it like anything. But most of the people that are listening to the podcast, I mean, look, research shows by Michael Mogadun, only 3% of women and 8% of men worldwide do any regularly scheduled exercise. Point I'm making is most people that are listening are not typically real athletes, and that the benefits that they would get from blood flow restriction training metabolically would have been something you would have had to go to the gym and do a regular training workout for maybe 45 minutes to an hour before. So now they can get the long-term metabolic effect, keep their body leaner and healthier, get rid of all the unnecessary body fat. And metabolism, elevated metabolism also has been shown by research to catabolize toxins in the body.
Oh, yeah.
For example, they did caffeine clearance tests, and they used sedentary people, they used aerobic athletes and bodybuilders, and they found that I think they gave them 1,000 milligrams of caffeine, and then they measured their blood markers for caffeine at intervals, and they found that bodybuilders could catabolize a lot more caffeine than anybody else could. And they don't know how it happens, but they concluded that the increased metabolic activity in the muscle is actually somehow burning up the caffeine or clearing it out of the system. So there's even a detox component, is what I'm saying. That there's another element to this that probably a lot of people wouldn't think of because they haven't looked at these types of studies. But, think of it, what do we do to get rid of garbage? We incinerate it. What is a lactate? We call it a burn because it's burning metabolic. It's a chemical burn,
Yeah. Harvard calls it afterburn.
The afterburn, yeah.
That's what it's a Harvard term, afterburn, right?
Yeah.
And this is what all these runners and endurance athletes are waking up to. Why am I 23% body fat? Why don't I have any muscle? Right? Because you are turning on stress and you're turning this off. The thyroid. People think that aerobic exercise is how you fix hypothyroidism. No, that's how you got. That's how you got there. Right. Here's what they miss, right? Because you go into a doctor, nothing against the doctors out there. You got lab tests. Let me write you a prescription. They don't tell them, hey, by the way, you got this little thing up here called thyroid stimulating hormone, which tells the thyroid what to do. And most people go, well, I haven't heard that one before. I teach all these ladies. They go, what? Thyroid, what? Stimulating hormone. When you're young, it's produced at high levels and it keeps your thyroid, which is metabolism, at a high level. So you're producing your thyroid hormones. You age, you go through childbearing years, you have stress, chemical, physical, emotional stress. This naturally slows down. It's still there. You're just not producing it or releasing it. So the thyroid's sitting here going, you're not telling me what to do. So it slows down and you get hypothyroidism. Studies show that if you do short, vigorous strength training, not long, not talking BFR, short, vigorous, like what Paul teaches, these short, quick, low stress, weight training, you increase thyroid stimulating hormone, the thyroid comes back. BFR does. And I can't even tell you how many ladies I've had call me back and said, why is my thyroid producing? Because you're stimulating growth hormone, which has a matching release of thyroid stimulating hormone. It goes here and turns this thing back on. And
yes. It's also, too, that very true, because I've seen it 1,000 times, if not 1,000,000 clinically. Once you start around stage 2, if you take adrenal fatigue, classically talked about stage 1, 2, and 3, by the time you're in stage 2, your body's actually getting overwhelmed with cortisol and you're starting to get a global fatigue effect. But by the time someone hits stage 3, they normally go into hypothyroidism.
Yep.
And so the way I tell people, I say, think of your thyroid as the throttle. It's like the gas pedal of your body. But if the way you're living and the way you're training is exhausting your body, then your nervous system automatically has to shut the thyroid down to bring you into a forced yin, a forced rest period. And you'll see that this is coming on because you start accumulating water around your belly. You get tired, lethargic. You can't even think straight. Your body gets cold. Your body temperature drops down 97, quite often 97, or even sometimes in cases lower. But the point is that the hypothyroidism is almost always the byproduct in athletes of overtraining, and your approach is a great antidote to that.
Yeah.
Enzymes are one of the most important things we can use to supplement our diet. Very few people have normal levels of digestive enzymes. It's extremely common to be digestive enzyme deficient because so many people are eating cooked foods, processed foods, packaged foods, etc. The best digestive enzymes I've ever found are mast zymes by Bioptimizers. And one of the things I like about them is not only are they the most advanced technology for how they're produced, the science behind them, but I take them on an empty stomach every morning and every night as proteolytic enzymes to help clean my body. So I've got Wade here, who's the formulator of these enzymes, to tell us how do they work as digestive and proteolytic enzymes, because today I think we really need to be supplementing with high quality enzymes. So Wade, what's unique about Masszymes?
Well, one of the interesting things is undigested protein is one of the biggest contaminants that cause problem for people, whether it's in their blood or inflammatory conditions or even impairing recovery. And it's quite common amongst athletes who have high protein diets, interesting enough, who are looking to add recovery, but they're not breaking down their protein effectively. And that was my case way back in the day as a former bodybuilding champion. So we set about cultivating and developing an enzyme formulation that handled all of the amino acids in a pH range from 2 to 12, as well as providing an assortment of assistant enzymes. In other words, it doesn't just break down protein, it handles carbohydrates, it handles fats, it handles fibers, a variety of different things, and they work synergistically together to make sure that you can break down just about any food and digest it properly. Now, when you talk about the difference between enzymes, there's digestive enzymes and systemic enzymes. Systemic enzymes such as like nattokinase or serrapeptase. Well, they don't help break down digestion, but they can break down inflammation or inflammatory conditions, undigested proteins, or scarring tissue inside the body. Well, it turns out when you take Masszymes on an empty stomach, it works exactly the same way. It will go into the bloodstream and now works as a systemic enzyme, reducing inflammation, accelerating recovery times. Matt just tore his Achilles tendon and made a full recovery after surgery within a few weeks, which they expected for many months. He was taking as many as 100 a day. Now, I'm not suggesting people do that, but this was an extreme condition. And the bottom line is Masszymes is great for recovery, for cleaning up undigested proteins in the system, as well for digesting just about any meal. If this isn't the best digestive enzyme or systemic enzyme that you've ever taken, you get your money back. That's the Bioptimizer guarantee.
You can try Bioptimizer's Masszymes at bioptimizers.com/living4D and get 10% off using the code PAUL10. That's bioptimizers.com/living, the number 4 and the letter D, and the code is PAUL10. Plus, Bioptimizers always have great bonuses and offers when you purchase multiple bottles. So make sure you check them out at bioptimizers.com/living4D and use the promo code PAUL10 for your 10% discount.
Here's what I can tell you, everyone. In my 7 years, and I not only sell BFR, I do 2 live calls a week. I coach hundreds of people every week on live calls. Everybody has access to me, right? I have never had to say to somebody, do more BFR. Not one single time. I'm always saying, you got to go shorter. They'll call me and say, I'm working out for 20 minutes. And so I teach people the 3 things. Now, I'm not talking about bodybuilders and elite athletes. You got to stress yourself. I'm talking general public people who want to get all the benefits. There's 3 things that I'm going to teach you. Number 1, you should feel the buzz when you do BFR. You'd be like, oh, I'm warmed up. If you lose that, if you get done and you're like, and tired, you went too far. You went into cortisol. So when you get the buzz, like when I work out, I'm like, whoa. You do a BFR session and 3 minutes later, you're like, okay, what's next? You got all this nitric oxide. Number 2, there should not be any pain, not during or after. If you got pain, you got to modify. I can get my shoulder to here any higher, and I've got a really bad shoulder. I'm going to go cortisol. Number 3, you should wake up and jump out of bed. If you get out of bed and you're in cortisol, it's easy. You're in cortisol. You've got to reduce or do something. And every time these people reduce, and some of them reduce down to 6 minutes, and I say, look, I only want 3 minutes of burn. I want you to get it in 6 minutes. They call me and go, my whole world just changed. I'm sleeping. I said, yes, you are producing growth hormone and you are minimizing cortisol. You're anabolic without the stress. And some people at 6 minutes, some people can go 20. Everybody's a little different. But, what Paul's teaching you is you go You overtrain, you start draining the adrenal, and then you go hypothyroidism. You're going to see muscle go away. You're going to see belly fat. You're going to see sleep problems. You're going to see all kinds of problems, aren't they, Paul?
Yes, of course. Yeah, you're right. It's all very fascinating, and you're inspiring me to put more time in on the bands and just see what I can do with myself. I've been writing a series of a 15-volume set of books now for 4 years, practically day and night. So my time in the gym has become short, not necessarily because I can't force myself to do it, but because I'm working so many hours that when I go to the gym, I'm tired because I need more sleep. So I'm sacrificing the gym consciously so that I can put more energy into finishing this. It's kind of like my magnum opus. And then there's a whole online training program and it's a big, big project. But I'm realizing that I can probably actually get as much benefit in 15 minutes or 20 minutes in the gym as I would when I was training, 45 minutes or so to an hour in the gym. When I was younger, I used to train an hour to an hour and 20.
Oh, yeah.
But then I got a hold of Russian research showing that they stopped doing long training sessions with the athletes because they found that the cortisol production was inhibiting growth hormone and recovery, and that they found by cutting the workouts down to 30 to 45 minutes and doing 2 or even 3 separated by as many hours as they could, the athletes got stronger, recovered better, slept better. And that was probably 15 or 20 years ago that I got a hold of that research. So when I found that, I started doing shorter, more intense, but I would do 2 workouts a day, 3 days a week, and 1 workout a day in the in-between days. And that was, when I reached peak strength at 42. That was when I was my strongest. But as I got busy and traveling on airplanes all the time, I had to kind of slow down a little because I couldn't handle that much training volume and living in total circadian stress for months and months at a time. But I'm going to play with the bands now because I think I just needed to talk to you and get more of a deeper understanding. So now I have
It's a big paradigm shift.
Well, for me, it was just understanding the physiology of it all. And I think the mistake I made is I went too heavy thinking that must be light enough because it's less than half of what I often lift,
Yeah.
But I'll go back at it again. I'm excited. I mean, like I told you, the reason I'm doing this with you is because Kyle's one of my very best friends in the whole world.
Oh, and it was massive. Yeah.
When Kyle's telling me, Paul, this stuff really works, Kyle does not tell me that unless it really works. I mean, he's as straight as an arrow can get. Now, I've done 2 comprehensive trainings in medical exercise therapy, both through the Norwegian system, which is, pretty full on. There's a lot of mathematical calculations and everything. And I've also studied the Russian literature on tendon training and cartilaginous repair. And typically what they recommend for cartilaginous and tendon training is 60 to 300 rep set, sometimes for cartilage rehabilitation all the way up to 1,000. Now you're using decreased load. Like sometimes I have to use things like a total gym so if I'm working on knee cartilage, I might take someone to 7% body weight and have them do 1,000 reps in a row, which it sounds like a lot, but it's really, basically what the function is to create oxygen debt in the tendons or in the region of the cartilage. And then the body responds by flooding it with blood and oxygen for oftentimes 2 or 3 days afterwards. And that's how the regeneration comes about. So I just wondered, it seems like this could be beneficial as well, because if you can get enough oxygen debt in around tendons and joints, you should actually get the hypertrophy, the nutrition in there, the blood in there, because the body's going to adapt to the oxygen debt. That's the whole point of these high reps.
Yeah.
Have you worked with tendon work and things like that?
Yeah. I mean, hundreds, if not thousands. And here's the first thing that I learned. When you age and you have trauma or wear and tear, right? Connective tissue starts losing its pliability, goes from kind of like a rubber band. But more important, your blood flow, your peripheral blood flow is not as good. You take your socks off, you got the little ring around there. There's your sign, right? Your fingernails are getting fungus. They're not growing, they're cracking. if you have peripheral vascular issues, you got vascular issues in all your tendons. So now you got a tendon that's not getting blood flow. And it's going to change. It's going to go from like a rubber band to like a piece of wax paper. But if you restore that blood flow. So here's what I used to think, and everybody thinks. If we mechanically load the tendon without tearing it more, we can stimulate the tendon to get stronger. What are you really doing? You're going into the fast twitch muscle fibers with load of the tendon and creating lactic acid, which increases growth hormone or repair. It takes the wax paper, starts making it like a rubber band again, and you're creating better circulation, more oxygen, more nutrients. Now, here's the 2 ways you'll know this happened. Every person I have that has tendonitis says, hey, we're going to work that tendon. I want you to put the BFR on. Tendonitis here, tendonitis here, tendonitis here, quads, Achilles, hip tendonitis. We're going to work the muscle, but you're going to work under pain, but with BFR. But in this training, you're going to feel the burn because there's not enough oxygen. And they call me after the first one and like, why is my pain 50% better? I just did 1 session. You just flooded oxygen in there. You just flooded oxygen and nutrition. Now, over time, and studies have already shown BFR increases tensile strength. You start rebuilding the tendon to go from like a wax paper back to a rubber band. Good buddy of mine, Rick Burkholder, athletic trainer, Kansas City Chiefs, taught me. I mean, one of the smartest guys I know, right? He's probably the top trainer. He gets our BFR, but he calls me and he says, Mike, I have figured out that nitric oxide, as important as I thought it was, is 10 times more important. I'm taking all my tendonitis, and before I do my dry needling and my ART and my Theragun and all my tools, I do BFR first. And I flood the muscle with more blood flow. And I'm getting rid of chronic tendonitis in 3 sessions with my dry needling and this, that, and whatever, ART and all the stuff we do. Every tendonitis I have starts with BFR. And then I can go do all my other, he says, and I'm curing tendonitis. It's like chronic for 3 years. I'm curing it in like 3. Yes, you're putting better blood flow into the tendons. So this won't reinvent treatment for tendonitis, but boy, you talk about a leap forward in being able to, stimulate some tendon repair with exercise. Because if you got tendonitis and you're doing rehab, you can't load. You can't go get the burn because you're damaged. You're stuck. You're stuck in the twilight zone. You can't get the growth hormone and nitric oxide because the tendon can't handle it. And that range of motion you're doing might be good for moving fluid, but it's not going to create any change in tendon strength and tendon, health.
What you're getting old. The addition to everything you've just said would be the intelligent use of ice baths, cold water, because that'll trigger huge circulation. The secret there is you just cannot stay in the water too long. That's where people make the mistake with ice baths, because once you go numb, you'll trigger what's called a hunter's reflex. And research shows that it takes about 3 days for peripheral circulation to normalize after that. So I always tell people cold plunges are great, but you don't want to go numb. Once you start feeling the tissue, your surface going numb, you get out if you're an athlete, or it's going to actually slow your recovery instead of speeding it. But I can see the mix of blood flow restriction training and intelligent use of cold therapies could really be a powerful combination. Your trainer guy would certainly know that, because they have
use the key word there. Cold plunge, not cold soak. Plunge.
Yeah,
get in.
Plunge. Yeah.
Get out. Right? Don't go soak in the thing for 30 minutes, right? And create that response you're talking about. Yeah.
Well, the way you know is when your fingers and toes start going numb, you got to get out.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're actually getting a negative effect for an athlete, especially.
My people that do BFR with cold plunges, I mean, it's like cold plunge on steroids, right? It's like exercise in the craziest anti-inflammatory. You put the two together and it's just, I mean, you talk about a powerful combination, right? Go get the nitric oxide, the anti-inflammatory macrophages, the analgesic endorphins, and the growth hormone, and give it a little time. Don't jump in right away. Don't turn off this anabolic response. It's like, don't go eat a bunch of sugar right after you do BFR. You'll turn off the growth hormone. Let the growth hormone come out before you go stimulating the insulin pathway, and then right? Cold plunge and eating, and that's a good time to bring that in.
That's an interesting concept because typically it's good to have athletes not eat sweet stuff. I say eat one serving sweeter than your normal metabolic proportion. So if you're a mixed type, eat an extra apple, or if you're a carb type, eat a little more. But I say one serving to get the insulin to deliver the nutrition into the muscle. But you're saying to give it a little time and not put the nutrition in.
Do that before prime, because look, here's what happens, everyone. You start using sugar in the muscle. That glycogen reservoir, that is a small little tank. It's not infinite. It's this little bit of sugar in there, and you're going to start tapping it. You want to be able to produce a volume of lactic acid. So if you eat, like Paul's telling you, before, and you turn on the insulin pathway, as soon as you're burning that glycogen, the body's faster putting it back. That's what you want. You want it going back in, and then you pulling it out by using glycogen, because you'll produce more lactic acid. If you have a good insulin blood sugar system that's kicked after exercise, you want to wait about 30 minutes.
That's the part that I'm interested in, because normally I tell athletes, eat before your sweat dries because your metabolism is going to slow down. And so if you bring carbohydrate into the system, for example, and your metabolism slows, you're just going to wear it on your body, but you want to get it in while it's hot. But what you're saying is because of the growth hormone release, you don't want the sugars getting there so quick.
No, you want that signal coming down to the thyroid. You want to turn on the thyroid. You want to turn on fat burn. You want to allow the protein synthesis pathway to kick in. Those muscle cells are going, feed me. They want protein. Now, they want carbs too, but right, let that growth hormone pathway turn on. And then if you wait 30 minutes and eat, here's what you're going to be like, boom. You're going to feel it. It's just going to, but you want the hormonal anabolic pathway to have a little bit of time to do it. And you'll notice, like if you eat right after and then you wait 30 minutes, the pump you'll get eating after 30 minutes will be crazy compared to eating right after.
Okay, interesting. I'll have to experience.
That's not mine. Dr. Jim Stray-Gunderson taught me this. He's the one that trains all the Olympic athletes, and he measures all this stuff.
Yeah, that's one thing they do today. They measure. I've been a consultant to the New Zealand All Blacks, and their head strength coach is one of my top level 4 practitioners for years. He was there, and the amount of technology these guys use to measure all this stuff, it's like a science lab these days. We talked a bit about all this, but the thing that I found interesting was Kyle had damaged cartilage in his knee, and it was causing him so much pain. He was having a hard time, getting any muscle development and training regularly. But for all the reasons we've just expressed, he said that his knee is now fully functional. He can train without any pain.
Yeah.
He's got muscle development around his knee. His quads are turned back on. So that was really amazing for me to hear. It makes a lot of sense now that you were explaining all these mechanisms, because now when he told me, not having had time to look into the literature and talk to you more deeply than just a meeting, now I can clearly see how it happened. Prior, when I was talking to Kyle, it was like, well, it's a damn good thing it is happening. Now I need to ask Mike how.
Well, how many people have had a 12-year-old tear a cartilage and they got to go in and stitch it back up? 12-year-old cartilage repairs.
It's gone. Oh, if it's 12, if it does repair, yeah.
Right. But man, I can't remember how many teenagers have to go in unless it's a massive major, and they're all getting the same stress. They are operating on elevated levels of growth hormone and super well blood flow into these tissues. Now we know, look, I know already, well, Dr. Mike cartilage doesn't have blood flow. Well, it has nutrition being brought in by the blood, right?
Yeah, right? It's fed by osmosis, but you got to get the blood to the area.
If you increase blood flow and growth hormone into cartilage, it's going to repair at a higher rate. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to heal, but in Kyle's case, we took him from his age back to an age of like 20 in connective tissue repair. The hormonal nitric oxide blood flow levels in him changed. Why? Because
you can see it in his body.
Yeah, he's like, I feel 20 again. Now, he's like me. I can't go barreling down a mountain anymore. The structural integrity of the joint is not there, but it doesn't hurt. right? Kyle's not going to jump back in the ring. The joint integrity is not there, but he has no more pain, right? The inflammatory process is being taken care of by the body because he's created a hormonal blood flow environment like he had 20, 25 years ago.
Well, guess what? Drew Canoli is sitting here right here with me, and I'm going to try to sell him on Organifi's green juice. Drew, you got to try this stuff. My kids love it. I love it. And for a lot of people that are too busy to get good shop and find, proper organic greens, it's the way to go. It's fast, it's easy, and it tastes good.
Yep.
But since you made it, why don't you tell everyone else about it?
Yeah. So one of the things that Organifi strives for is transparency in labels.
That's a good idea.
We almost have 4 grams of the greens, organic greens, and then 3 grams of the superfood blend. Not to mention 600 milligrams of ashwagandha.
Yes.
300 milligrams is the clinical dose for lowering stress. And when we're not stressed out, we don't crave food. Right,
you don't crave junk.
You don't crave junk.
Yeah.
And because you don't crave junk, it actually helps support weight loss.
Yeah.
So naturally, and this is the first green juice that was, with the ashwagandha in it, and now it's glyphosate residue free. It's amazing.
You know what I like about this and all of your juice mixes of this style? 1, they taste good. 2, I can get up out of my chair and in 32 seconds, I can have something that tastes good and feels good in my body and actually contributes to my mental stability and my ability to get work done or to my weightlifting or to my overall physiological adaptation to the stress of life.
Yeah, when we're stressed out, we don't produce testosterone as men.
Yes.
As much.
Shuts it way down.
So the ashwagandha helps with that. And one of my favorite mentors told me that it's a bioharmonizer.
It's a bioharmonizer for sure. We don't do biohacking around here. And that's why I love your products, because they are bioharmonizers. And that's what we all need, right?
So, absolutely.
Thank you to Organifi and you for making such great products. I really love sharing them on my podcast, and my kids and my family use them daily. So this is the real deal. So if you want to get your green juice, you can go to Organifi, ORGANIFI.com/CHEK20, and on checkout, use the code CHEK20. Does it need to be all caps or does it case sensitive?
Doesn't matter.
Just CHEK20, get 20% off, and that's a damn good
family
deal.
discount.
And your whole family will be the better for it. And you will enjoy the taste and feel good and know that you're doing something that your doctor won't do for you.
Absolutely.
Aho, great spirit.
Aho.
Aho. Thanks, buddy.
When you have good friends and they're people you really love, it always feels good to know they're feeling better. Like when Kyle told me how much better he was feeling, it was just like, because I love the guy and I want him to be comfortable in his body. And I know how hard he's working to build his farm with Aubrey, and he's a father, and when guys get to be our age, if your body's all beat up, it can really affect your sex drive too, because you're hurting all the time. So, when you get a technique like this that allows you to euthanize yourself, it can really touch all the areas of your life, from playing with your kids to making love to what you can do in the garden. I mean, it's really, it's like a web of connection. And I think one of the things I'm bringing this up for is so that people that are listening that don't consider themselves athletes can realize, like you said, you can use some pink dumbbells and even some light stretch bands. And for a lot of people, just doing body weight exercises. So you don't need to have a gym membership. You can benefit from this quite easily.
You should see my quads, everyone. I haven't loaded a weight on my lower body in 10 years. And I got these big quads, and I do body weight stuff.
Yeah,
I got
great.
I got 3 replaced joints and no cartilage in my right knee. And you'd look at me and go, okay, where'd all that muscle come from? Growth hormone. Okay, but how did you go get the growth hormone without lifting heavy weights? Well, because growth hormone comes from lactic acid, everyone. And what we're realizing, remember, yes, we can mechanically go fatigue fast twitch muscles, but now we figured out a pathway to metabolically, oxygen manipulation, attack and go get fast twitch muscles and fatigue them and produce the same lactic acid that gives the same growth hormone and all this connective tissue repair and hypertrophy.
Yeah, lovely. We've talked about quite a bit of different applications. Are there other types of injuries or health challenges that you found blood flow restriction helpful for?
We've got women who do pre and post DEXA scans adding 10 to 15% bone density. Now,
Oh, great.
and we've got people healing fractures in 2 weeks. Now, let me talk about bone density for everybody that has a wonderful lady in their life that they love, my mom, that might have bone density issues, right? What if we take a lady who has osteoporosis and we put her in the gym and we lift heavy weights? We all know what's going to happen. First thing we're going to do is we'll break every bone in their body.
You're going to get sued.
If they survive the squats and deadlifts, what's going to happen to their bones? They're going to get stronger.
Yeah.
We think in terms of mechanical load. Where did the bone density come from? It came from a thing called bone-specific alkaline phosphatase. It does not, your bones don't go, oh, that's heavy weight.
Mm-hmm. It's a
I'm
chemical
going to make
reaction.
them strong. It's a hormonal. So
Yeah.
these ladies are doing walking and things they can do, and they go, oh, I feel the burn. Yeah. Now watch what happens. Growth hormone goes down into the liver downstream. Growth hormone's not causing this, everyone. It's the master hormone that causes all the downstream stuff. Goes in the liver, pops out bone-specific alkaline phosphatase, and up goes your bone density. And these women didn't start eating, drinking. They didn't do anything except start doing BFR. So it's like we put them in the gym and started doing all the heavy weights, but we didn't do any heavy weights, and their bone density starts going up. I've got athletes that are healing fractures in 2 weeks. I got one of the most famous pickleball players in history. He's Scott Moore, and he fractured his heel. I was with him. Went and got an X-ray. Doc said, "Yeah, you fractured your heel right there. In 8 weeks, we're going to put you in a cast." Looks over at me. I said, "Get the boot." Puts the boot on, and he's got Indian Wells Nationals coming up in 3 weeks. So Scott, here's what happens when people get injured and fractured. They stop. Right? When they need growth hormone the most, they stop. They got the stress of the injury. So, Scott, we're going to go home, and right now we're going to go work a non-injured body part to keep growth hormone from crashing. We're going to flip your cortisol growth hormone level and put you back anabolic right now. And within 3 days, he was starting to do stuff on his legs. A week, he was out of the boot. In 2 weeks, they x-rayed, and the guy goes, he didn't have a fracture. Let me tell you about my hip replacement, everyone. First hip replacement, 12 weeks. That was great. You know, I did all the normal stuff. And here's what Dr. Jim taught me. He said, Mike, and he's seen this in Olympic athletes that have miraculous healing in 2 or 3 weeks. He says, I want you to go and immediately, as soon as you can, start doing a non-injured body part. Okay? Yep. And so I'm 2 weeks post-surgery. I wake up in my room 2 weeks. 2 hours later, I snuck in my pink dumbbells. I'm on the edge of the bed. 2 hours post-hip replacement. Nurse comes in and goes, well, just about lost her mind. I'm like, okay, what do you need? What put the pills there. Just get out of my room. So got her out. Then I start walking. I'm doing my arms. It's 3 days post-surgery. I got the tubing around my legs, and I'm doing the same movements, but here's the difference. When I'm doing these hip motion movements, I'm feeling a pump and burn in my hip muscles. I'm producing growth hormone. And I got the video. At 5 weeks, I was running on a hip replacement. Blew my mind. I was going through, this is when I went through the BFR experience. 5 weeks. And now I'm seeing it in every athlete that it's like 50% faster recovery. So think, if I injure, if I have any injury or any dysfunction, what would happen if instead of going high cortisol, low growth hormone, I kept growth hormone high?
Yeah.
Everybody
it's
knows.
no brainer.
No brainer. Yeah.
Yeah. I used to use total gyms, and I invented an unweighting machine so that when I had injured athletes, I could decompress their spine. I could take the load off their neck, their back, their joints. So I had unweighting machines that I built over an upper body.
And you worked them out, didn't you?
Yeah. I had an upper body ergometer under one. I had a treadmill under one. And then I would also use swimming pools to get athletes into the water so that they could train and keep their body fit and load the body. Because just like you said, a lot of them get injured and they just stop, but then they take forever to get back because you can't get them up to pre-adequate levels for competition without a long buildup, because you can't just do that overnight. And I was forever having to rehab people that would go through, say, therapy for a disc or a meniscal tear. And then they would go right from pure rehab right back to football practice. And the next thing you know, they've blown it again. And so I found that by using unweighted exercise and hydrotherapy type exercise and cold water therapies you could really accelerate the return. But with what you're talking about with blood flow restriction, I could take that to a whole new level of holy shit, hallelujah, let's get it on.
Well, you were using the technology you had then to manipulate growth hormone. You were keeping athletes who were injured in an anabolic state. You weren't letting, because if they go cortisol, they're going to atrophy and decondition. So you were at the forefront of using the technology you had. Now you can use BFR or combine, or just use BFR and put it on the arm. And studies show that if I just work my arms, the quad won't atrophy. Let me tell you Dr. Sato's story of how his breakthrough. He has a skiing accident. He tears ligaments in his knee, and he fractures 2 fractures in his lower leg ankle area, the tibia and the talus. So put a full body cast on him, and he postulates, this was 7 years after his epiphany of kneeling down. He postulates, well, maybe if I put a judo belt above the cast and he just does exercises. His goal is to stop the atrophy. So he's trying to create a local prevention, a local change in muscle, prevent it. So they take the cast off at 6 weeks. Why? Because the leg atrophies and the cast starts slipping. You got to put a new one on. Well, his wasn't slipping. They take it off at 6 weeks. He had no atrophy of his quad. And then the x-ray and the ligaments and bone had healed. And he figured out, I'm creating a local muscle physical change and a full body systemic growth hormone change. That was his massive breakthrough that he figured out, oh, I can go treat bone density. I can treat brain degeneration. There's a study on 103 people with chronic kidney disease. The group that did BFR had an attenuation or a stopping of the progression of the kidney disease. So this growth hormone nitric oxide system, right, that you turn on, wow.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful technology. I'm really glad Kyle turned me on to, because I like to bring people things that can really enhance their life in meaningful ways. You know, I'm not a gadget guy. I'm not a guy that likes to show shit to people. And there's too much of that out there as it is. I'm not a big biohacking guy at all either, because I believe people overlook foundation principles. But really what you're teaching is foundation principles. It's just using the science of human physiology in a way that is intelligent and more effective, that it took an injured doctor to pay attention to give us the gift, you know?
Yeah. Everybody likes to travel, right? You go on orbits, you fly from LA to New York, right? And there's 2 flights there. There's the one that stops in St. Louis, and there's the direct one, and they both cost the same amount. How many people are doing the one stopping in St. Louis? Nobody. Here's what's happening, everyone. Science is all pointing to it. Shorter, quicker, robust fatigue, less stress workouts. BFR is the direct flight now to fatigue and adaptation in muscle. It's not the end all, but it is a tool that, look, every Olympic athlete's got these. Every NFL training room's got them. This is already proven in that world. It's now coming to exercise, and it's going to be a tool that everybody's going to want to have in their toolbox.
Are there any limitations for this type of training, or contraindications that's important to put on the table just so people know?
Well, you know, the most common one I get is lymphedema. And typically lymphedema is in upper or lower. So if they got lymphedema on their arms, we can work their legs. If they got lymphedema on the legs, we can work their arms. I haven't met anybody yet that we couldn't, right? If you've had mastectomy, lymph node removal, and your doctor says to you, I don't want a blood pressure, hey, we can go work other body parts, okay? Lymphedema, number one. Just had one person today's got an indwelling catheter, right? Hey, we're not going to put BFR on an extremity with a catheter. Pregnant, right? Out of an abundance of caution. We're not going to take a pregnant lady and go take her into the 45-minute CrossFit class with the 25-year-old CrossFit gurus, right? We're not going to do that. Same thing. We're not going to take a pregnant lady and put her in a BFR metabolic crisis. If she's been doing it, she should talk to her doctor, right? So you got those things, right? People who have severe cardiovascular complications. Here's the most common one I get. Oh, I got high blood pressure. I can't do it. I said, no, well, wait a second. If you create nitric oxide and the blood thins and your heart is now pushing water instead of oil, is it going to work harder or easier? Well, what's harder to push, oil? Well, when you push blood through a restricted system that's closed and the blood is thick, your blood pressure goes up. What if the blood vessels open and the blood gets thinner? So studies show that BFR actually reduces blood pressure better than most exercises. So, cardiovascularly, yeah.
Is there anything you'd like to share that we have not covered yet?
No, I think the basics, right? What I encourage people to is dive into it. And here's the number one thing I say. What I want you to do with your BFR experience is add it to what you love. I don't want you to go work out the way I do. You can add this to rowing, golf, anything you do, because if you are still exercising, Paul will tell you this, after 30 days, and you're still producing growth hormone and nitric oxide, you're anti-aging. So what I would like you to do, put this in your toolbox so that you can keep doing whatever you're passionate about and elevate growth hormone and nitric oxide. And if you're still doing it 30 days from now, you're going to be like Kyle. You're going to be like somebody turned back the clock 20 years. That's the key. So if you're using Paul's techniques, keep doing them. Here's a tool for you to potentially do that a little bit more efficient, but keep doing the same techniques he teaches you.
Great. Where can people learn about the B3 approach, buy the bands, and get started on their program? And what is the investment?
B3 Sciences, the letter B, the number 3, the word sciences.com, B3 Sciences, right? When you check out, just put Paul's name, you'll have a survey. The bands, upper and lower bands, are $449. Come with a 30-day money-back guarantee. You get a test drive. You get videos and coaching. You get live calls. We even send you some exercise tubing. And you get a 12-month warranty. And here's what I love. You're going to get 30 days to play with. If you don't love them, send them back dirty, sweaty, smelly, any way you want. But I can tell you there's only one type of bands that ever come back to us, and they're the kinds that people don't put on. You put them on. If you put them on, you're going to feel. And there's one other type of person who's going to shy away and say, I'm not going to get the pump and the burn. Well, we can't help you there, right? You got to create fatigue in your body, and that's a good thing. So, and we provide support. Like, Kyle has probably told you, we provide the best support by far in the BFR industry. And you want, the right kind of bands, right? You want bands that are proven safe. These are flexible, multiple air chamber. We have safety studies. You don't want to be putting $29 tourniquets on your arms. Don't do that. Do this in a safe way with a company that's, has guarantees and has studies on these. And, that's over at b3sciences.com. And you're going to learn about all these things we talked about, thyroid. Those are all on that website for you to learn about if you'd like to learn about your specific issue.
Your website's real good. There's a lot of information there. It's nice and clean. It's easy to navigate. So that's great. I can't remember, Mike, was there a discount for Living 4D listeners? I can't remember what we worked out on that.
Yeah, if you put in Living 40 to that survey, right? Put in Paul Chek or Living 40, you'll get free shipping. We'll refund you the $24.99. So when you check out, you put Living 40 in there, you'll get not only free coaching, but you'll get the free shipping with it. So you'll save another $25.
Yeah, that's Living 4, lettered capital D, 4D,
Living
like 4 doctors.
4D. Yep, put that in, everyone, or put in Paul's name that you saw it on the podcast, and you will get a refund of your shipping charge for seeing it on this podcast.
Well, thank you, Mike. What a fantastic conversation. It was fun because I haven't really talked physiology with anybody in quite a while. So I'm going through the old file drawers in the mental library and dusting shelves off there. It was really good for me because now I have enough of a sense of understanding of how and why that I feel more inspired to go give it more of a regular inclusion in my workout. My first thing was just to test it, to say, can I share this with people and feel good about it? And then, Kyle's recommendation was enough to do that. But now that I have had this conversation with you, I really feel like I can maximize my shorter workouts while I'm finishing this huge project and kind of get the best of both worlds. I can keep my heavy workflow, but I can also benefit my body. So what a great gift.
Yeah, you're going to call me in 30 days and go, wow. Everybody does. Now,
Excellent.
We don't know what all those wow factors are, but you're going to have some wows. Oh, wow, this, that, and the other. And I want to reiterate, everyone, I don't get to have many conversations like this. So I want to thank Paul because this dude knows what he's talking about. So, Paul, thanks for having me on here. It was great to talk to somebody.
Oh, well, thank you. It's my pleasure. It was really fun, and it was very stimulating for my mind, and I like that. So thank you to all of you. Hey, let's get in shape. Remember, we got a world that needs our help. So you can't do anything if you're too tired to wipe your ass and get involved. Let's be health warriors and world warriors and spiritual warriors. And thanks to my sponsors for all the great products you provide and for practicing ethical farming and other practices that support the planet. And thanks to all of you for anything you buy from our sponsors. It supports the podcast so I can keep finding geniuses like Mike to guide us and inspire us to stay young, stay strong, and stay wise, not torture ourselves trying to get healthy. And lots of love to all of you. I will look forward to having something new, exciting, and interesting and amazing for you next Tuesday. See you then.
Thank you for listening to Living 4D with Paul Chek and today's guest, Dr. Mike DeBord. You can find Mike and B3 bands online at their website, chek.prob3.com. That's chek.prob3.com. There is a wealth of information on the site about using B3 bands and blood flow restriction training for improving health, sports performance, and training a variety of different populations. When you purchase the B3 BFR bands, you'll also get free coaching, free exercise tubing, a free backpack, and as well, free access to live calls and the BFR Exercise Library. Just go to chek.prob3.com to find out more. That's chek.prob3.com. Catch up with Paul on Instagram, TikTok, and Threads at paul.chek, on X at paulchek, or on his YouTube podcast channel, youtube.com/Living4D with Paul Chek. You can watch more on Paul's blog at paulcheksblog.com or visit the Chek Institute site at chekinstitute.com to find Paul's e-learning courses, advanced training programs, and to learn more about the Chek Academy. You can read the show notes and find links to the resources mentioned in this episode at chekinstitute.com/podcast. Again, a big thank you to our premier sponsors, Bioptimizers, Paleo Valley, and Organifi. We could not produce this podcast without their support. As you heard in this episode, all our sponsors offer special discounts for our listeners. So please visit the show notes page at chekinstitute.com/podcast for the links and details. And finally, if you enjoyed today's episode, please consider leaving us a 5-star rating and a warm review on the podcast platform of your choice. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, and YouTube.